Hello everybody, how's things, how's life? Hope everybody is well. The last system we are going to get into for 122 is the reproductive system, right? Up until now we've covered, right, spanning from 121 to now, covered everything from the chemistry, the histology, the cell biology, muscular system, the skeletal system, cardio, respiratory, right? We just covered urinary, digestion, endocrine, right? We covered the integument, right? All of these different systems were covered. Here's the last one that we're going to cover. So, hey, celebrate the small stuff, right? This is a small thing. There's still some more to do, but hey, celebrate the small things, right? This is the last system we're going to be covering in 122, right? Hoorah. So, reproduction, right, in men and in women, it is entirely different from an anatomic standpoint. Well, I'd say entirely different. It is quite a bit different from an anatomic standpoint, right? Whereas in males, right, both males and females have gonads, for instance, right? Those gonads produce different hormones, right? Testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. The same sex hormones which are produced via the gonads are present in both males and females, right? So there's some kind of synonymous structures with each, but they do have their own inherent differences, right? So obviously in the reproductive system, it's not just merely reproduction, right? Obviously that's one of the bigger important pieces of it, but the actual production of these different sex hormones, right? Because of the drive of testosterone, for instance, or the synthesis of tissue, which is driven from estrogen, for instance, right? There's many different functions and reasons as to why these hormones are unbelievably important, right? So as we kind of go through this, right, we're going to look at some of the different features, some of the different structures, which are present in the respective anatomy. Now here, right, when we look at the male portion of the reproductive system, right, we can see, there we go. All right, so with the urinary system, right? The urinary system we just covered up, and up here is the bladder, right? This was the urinary system, or this was a part of it. This was the bladder. This big long tube here, that was the ureter, which carried urine from the kidney down to the urinary bladder. Okay, awesome. Once we are in the reproductive system, there's a number of things that we can see. Some are accessory glands, some are primary. When I say accessory, I mean, yeah, they're kind of like secondary importance, right? Some of the things that we see, for instance, right, in the gonads, right, or in males, what are called the testes or the testicles. I almost said testiculars because that's where I'm at, right? The testicles. Within the testes, we'll look at it later, but that's where testosterone, as well as that's where the sperm are going to be produced. Right? Some of the other structures, right? The epididymis, right? The vas deferens or the ductus deferens, right? The different portions of the urethra, the different portions of the prostate, right? We're going to look at this more in depth, but here I just kind of want to get a grasp of where these kind of structures are in relation to each other, right? The urinary bladder. Here, essentially directly inferior to that is where the prostate is. Again, the prostate gland, that is only in males, right? Females do not have a prostate gland, right? Period. They don't have one. Okay, so here's the prostate. Then beneath that, right, directly inferior to that, again, the root of the penis, right here. We see these different kind of speckled appearances, right, of different portions of the penis. Right, those are different caverns. Those are going to help to create an erection later on. right? I don't know, probably half an hour, a little bit later on today in this lecture, in this presentation, we're going to talk about the different chambers and how it is they are responsible for causing an erection. Right, but some other things to kind of pay attention to. Right, look at where, again, here's the rectum. Right, there's a reason why, men in their 40s and really in their 50s and above, they go to their primary, and the primary slaps on a rubber glove, puts some lube on. Hopefully they put some lube on their index finger, and they snap the glove on. They're like, all right, let's do this. Bend over and drop trowel. It's like, well, all right, let's do this. Right, there's a reason why, right, or for a prostate exam, right, the insertion of a finger up through the rectum. Well, because the prostate is right here. So if there is, for instance, an enlarged prostate, it's something you can it's something you can absolutely feel to the touch. Right? That makes sense? Right? It has entirely to do with where the anatomy is. Some other things, Cowper's glands, corpus cavernosum, like I mentioned, these are things we're going to look at here in just a couple of minutes. Again, here's just a gross anatomy, gross anatomic image of the different structures, right, from the urinary bladder, pubic symphysis, right, the urethra up and through here. All right, so we'll get some more specific pictures here in just a minute. Before we get kind of in deep with looking at the caverns and the different glands and the different structure within the penis itself, we're just going to look at some of the different supporting casts, or some of the different supporting tissues, right? All this kind of whitish band up in through here, right? These are different ligaments, different connective tissues, right? These two specifically, right? Something called the fundiform ligament and something called the suspensory ligament. These are two ligaments which help to support and kind of anchor the penis to kind of to this pubic symphysis, right? Right here, suspensory ligament here, right? Anchored to the kind of the shaft of the penis, if you will, and then as it comes up, it attaches to the pubic symphysis. Again, that's to support the penis and the testes, so they don't simply dangle or drop down too far, right? That will happen in time, right? 60, 70, 80-year-olds, good Lord, they're like tripping over these things. They're like basset hounds. I mean, just come on. Anyways, a couple other things that we see, right? When the penis, when it's cut in half like this, it almost kind of looks like a fish or a shark, right? The suspensory ligament kind of looks like the dorsal fin. His big bulbous eyes here and here. And you got this mouth. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm bored, but I see it. I see it. Surrounding the urethra, right? So the hole here, that's the urethra. Cool. Surrounding the urethra is something called the corpus spongiosum. Corpus spongiosum. The two large eyeballs, those are the corpora cavernosa. These two chambers, right, the corpora cavernosa as well as the corpus spongiosum, they are going to engorge and fill with blood to produce an erection. That's what actually occurs. That's what actually happens. Up here, right, something called the spermatic cord. Or literally, the spermatic cord is like the rope that kind of hangs onto the testes. Now, there are many more structures inside of the spermatic cord. Right, within the spermatic cord, there's the cremaster muscle. There's the ductus deferens or the vas deferens. Right, there's the piniform plexus of veins. Right, there's the testicular artery. Right, there's a number of different structures and vessels that exist within the spermatic cord. Right, the cremaster muscle, which I pointed to right here. That's the muscle which is going to help elevate and kind of tuck the testes up under and kind of to the up kind of to the underside, right, to protect them, right, from a swift kick, whatever happens to be. So at the end of the spermatic cord, right, how I mentioned, that's where the testy is. That's where the testy exists. That's this thing right here. Within the testy, right, we can see these little, they almost look like compartments. Yeah, these individual compartments are called lobules. So a lobule here, one lobule, two lobule, and so on and so forth. And those different lobules are separated by a septum. Okay, that's the septum. Within each lobule are these squiggly little lines. Those are what are called seminiferous tubules. Seminiferous tubules. These are what are going to actually produce the sperm. So within the seminiferous tubules, that's where the sperm are actually produced. Once they are produced, they're then dumped into something called the straight tubule. The straight tubules, this one here, right, all of them, too far up here, they are going to feed into something called the ret testy. The ret testy. From the ret testy, from the ret testing in this whole structure here, that is then going to feed up into the epididymis via something called the afferent duct. So just like men, well, not just like men, I had to think about that. No, it's not at all like men. But sperm, once they're produced, it takes around 3 months for them to mature. Men, we never mature. I mean, hell, at the first glance of an ice storm, my ass is heading for like the closest empty parking lot to do donuts in it. Like, right? Like that's the kind of creature us men are. Right? We're simple. Right? Yeah. So, anyways, my whole point, right? Sperm have to mature for around 3 or so months, and where they do that is within the epididymis. Right? So within these kind of tubes here, right, all these tubes, that's where they actually mature for around 3 or so months. And eventually, that's going to feed up into something called the vas deferens, or the ductus deferens. We saw it a second ago, because remember, the ductus deferens, we see it right here, up and around, and eventually dumps into the urethra. The ductus deferens, or the vas deferens, that's what actually allows the sperm to leave the testy and head up to the vas deferens, eventually to be ejaculated. All right. A couple other things. Right, this outermost layer of the testy is something called the tunica vaginalis. This outermost layer, tunica vaginalis. Right. There's a parietal and visceral layer. I don't know, like that's just tunica vaginalis is fine. Right. Lining the lobules is something called the tunica albuginea. The tunica albuginea. So here, again, actual, again, gross model, epididymis through here, comes down. You can't really see where the transition wraps around, but working its way up this way, eventually it feeds up into the spermatic cord, as in the vas deferens. Right, you can't really see that. Right, even here, you can't really see the seminiferous tubules. You can see it kind of roughened up a little bit, but you can't really tell any sort of specific tubule or anything like that exists. To be able to see the tubule, you really need to have a much greater, you need to have some degree of magnification, right? From the naked eye, you just simply can't see the tubules. Oh my gosh, look at that, magnification, right? This is what the tubules look like. This is literally what they look like. All right, it's just a series, just take a handful of straws, cut them in half, and then look top down. It's kind of what you're looking down through. The way it works. Right, yeah, you can, I'll show you this one's better. I'll stick with this one. So this outermost layer here, where the red is, there are like super immature sperm, right? Very immature sperm. Once the sperm are dumped into the lumen, dumped into the hole, right, into the middle of the tube, that's where they are a spermatid, they are mature. Okay. Along here, right, you see how these cells, right, this cell looks different from this cell, which looks different from, for instance, this cell. I'm just going to erase those so you can see. But just pay attention to those three. Does that cell I just erased look anything like that cell I just erased? Or does that look anything like that? No, they all look different. And that's because as we travel closer to the lumen, those sperm cells mature. Well, they're actually developing. They're going from spermatogonia to spermatocytes, and spermatocytes into what's called spermatins. So there's a couple more steps, but we're not gonna go into it here. The cells in between the tubules, right? So you can see, like all these cells in through here, in between the tubules, in between the tubules. Those are called interstitial cells. You may also see them called Leydig cells or the interstitial cells of Leydig. All of those are the same thing. Those are the particular cells which are going to produce testosterone. Right, those are the cells which are going to produce testosterone. From the seminiferous tubule, right, this is what's going to be produced. Sperm cell. Right, spermatid. So, this guy here, we can see there's different structures on the, on this particular sperm cell. There's a couple of things that we see. When we look, we see this head portion through here. There's something called an acrosome. We'll look at that in a second. This middle portion, right, or what's called the middle piece, if you will. Right. This is where the mitochondria are going to be housed. Right. This is where the mitochondria are going to be housed. Right. The sperm cell. Right. The sperm cells have to produce a huge amount of energy. They use a tremendous amount of energy. Right? Sperm cells, or these spermatozoa, I think a minute ago I called them spermatids. Sorry, that's immature. They're not spermatid. I'm sorry, it's well past being a spermatid at this point. I apologize. They're called spermatozoa or sperm cell. Brain fart. They produce a huge amount of energy. Right? This tail piece, right? This piece from here down to here actually produces locomotion. It actually produces movement. That is very different. This is the only cell that we know of in the body that actually produces its own locomotion. Now you might want to think, well, the cell moves itself. Not really. I mean, it can shorten and lengthen its size, right? But it doesn't move anywhere. This, right, the sperm cell literally can move from point A to point B. It swims itself through the vas deferens. It swims itself through all of the vaginal secretions, for instance. Right? It actually moves itself. That's why it's something called a flagellum. Right? The only cell that we know of that's a flagellum in humans. Right? Up here, this thing called the acrosome. This is like a little digestive enzyme, if you will. Right? Eventually, the idea is this sperm is going to meet up with an oocyte, or the egg. The idea is that this sperm there's the egg, that this sperm will find the oocyte and be able to penetrate through this and get into the oocyte. The acrosome, this enzyme here, is what helps to penetrate through certain layers of the oocyte. So without it, you're like trying to use a drill with no drill bit. It's going to be absolutely useless. Right? Okay. So the sperm didn't look like this always. Right? This, again, sperm cell, spermatozoa, there's multiple steps along the pathway, right? From a spermatogonia to a spermatocyte, spermatid, right? And within the epididymis, how we mentioned, this is where the sperm cell is going, well, what eventually will become the sperm cell. This is where it matures so it can become so, right? If we look down on this big pool, you can make out, especially kind of down and through here, you can make out some individual, almost tadpole looking things. Yeah, those are the sperm. Those are the sperm cells. Right? This is what the epididymis looks like. You can see the number of kind of tubes, the number of channels, and the amount, right? There's, all men are different. Some have tens of millions, some have 300, hundreds of millions of sperm per, within the epididymis. Often it's more than that, but it really depends on, right, age, sexual activity. Age is the big one, right? If you're a pubescent boy, right, 14 years of age, good God, you're just a walking hormone, right? You've got significantly greater levels of sperm because of age and the spike in testosterone and all of that that's taking place. So, in this picture we already saw an image of, so I'm going to move on from there. This here is just a look at some of the different hormones which are involved, right? So when we look at this image, right, for the hypothalamus releases something called gonadotropin-releasing hormone. That then in turn releases or stimulates the gonadotrophs to release gonadotropin-releasing hormone. Right? Now, this particular type of gonadotropin-releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, again, that stimulates the gonadotrophs to release what's called FSH and what's called LH. FSH is follicle stimulating hormone. As I mentioned, follicle stimulating hormone is going to stimulate the production of sperm cells. Luteinizing hormone is going to stimulate the production of testosterone from the, does anybody remember the name of the cell? From the Leydig cell or the interstitial cell. Again, same thing, choice is yours. Right. But just like normal, right, this is a negative feedback system. Right? So for instance, as LH causes the production of testosterone, the production of testosterone actually inhibits the release of gonadotropin-releasing hormone. So if it inhibits the release of gonadotropin-releasing hormone, that means there is no more release of that hormone. If there's no more release of gonadotropin-releasing hormone, that means there's no more release of FSH or LH, therefore testosterone levels stop elevating. Make sense? Alright. So here, right, testosterone, right, dihydrotestosterone, DHT, let's call it that. So, DHT is a very potent form of testosterone, right, very potent. You can see male pattern of development, right, enlargement of male sex hormones, expression of male secondary sex characteristics, anabolism, protein synthesis. Yeah, all of these things are driven from testosterone. That's why, like in about the age of puberty, right, young boys go from, they don't really smell much of anything, maybe a little bit, to, good God, they just smell like a foot, like 24/7. Like, just doesn't matter. They just bathe and, God, they just smell. Right? Part of the reason why is because of the development of some of these secondary sex characteristics. Right? Certain sweat glands begin to increase in activity. Right? The development of axillary and pubic hair. Right? Increased secretions of different oils from the hair and from the follicles. Right? All of these things can then penetrate and encapsulate bacteria, which then cause odors. Right? Now that's just from an odor standpoint, which is substantial enough. I had to talk about it. But the other thing that it can do, again, is begins to increase the amount of tissue synthesis or protein synthesis. Yeah, muscle mass. Right? The increase starts to elongate the thyroid cartilage, right, to develop that, that colloquially called Adam's apple, right. Also starts to thicken the vocal cords, right. These are all examples of those secondary sex characteristics which are going to be achieved through testosterone. This I just gave an example of that. So here, just a different view of the male reproductive tract, right? But this is a little bit more of some of the accessory glands, right? Okay, here's the bladder. All right, this here, vas deferens comes up, and then we've got, I don't know, some weird looking stuff. The vas deferens and the seminal vesicle combine into something called the ejaculatory duct. The ejaculatory duct feeds into the prostatic urethra. The prostatic urethra then eventually feeds down into what's called the spongy urethra. Alright. So, vas deferens wraps around, joins with the seminal vesicle. They combine into the ejaculatory duct. The ejaculatory duct feeds into the prostatic urethra. Surrounding the prostatic urethra is the actual prostate itself. Right? This here is all prostate. Cool. There's some small glands right here. They're called bulbourethral gland or Cowper's gland. Right? These all add to the ejaculate, right? From the prostate gland, the seminal vesicle, the Cowper's gland. They all add to the ejaculate, right? What's ejaculated. Right? The most important, their function is one of a couple of things. One is to provide nourishment and energy for the sperm. Two is to counteract the acidity of the urethra as well as the acidity of the female vagina. Right? The urethra, the vagina, have to make sure that there's some sort of physiologic difference to mitigate the potential growth of pathogenic bacteria. So the fact that they have a slightly acidic pH means that helps to, thwart off bacteria. The problem with it is it also thwarts off happy, healthy, normal sperm cells. So there has to be something in order to counteract this acidity, and that's what comes from the prostate, the seminal vesicle, and the bulbourethral gland. And again here, just because I like cadaveric models, right here. All right. So here is, again, a little bit better of an image of the penis. Right? So we see, right, the root of the penis, bulb of the penis, crux of the penis, right up and through here. Right? But either way, right, let's just look at, kind of continue where we had started from. The prostatic urethra travels down, 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 down. Eventually, it enters into what's called the spongy urethra. And the reason why it's called the spongy urethra is because it's surrounded by the corpus spongiosum. This thin, it's thin, here to here. Thin, both sides. And as it comes out, it encapsulates essentially the entire, what's called the glans penis, or kind of the head of the penis, if you will. Right? That's all spongy, or corpus spongiosum. Now, lateral to that is what's called the corpora cavernosa. Get all this in through here. Corpora cavernosa. Now I mentioned these are the two layers, or these are the combined two groups of chambers, which are going to fill and engorge with blood in order to create an erection. Now, the prepuce, or something called the foreskin, right, that covers the head, or that covers the glans penis. Again, the prepuce, or the foreskin, that's what's removed during circumcision, right? The U.S. is one of the very few countries. I mean, there are, I think you can count them on one hand, right? Outside of religious reasons, right? Leaving those aside, right? The U.S. is one of just a handful of countries that still routinely practices circumcisions, right? It's something that is not widely practiced any longer, hasn't been for decades. The idea was, years and years ago, it was practiced because the thought was it helped to reduce penile infections as well as penile cancer risk. Is that correct? Yes and no. The problem was in order to see any sort of significant decrease in these numbers, there had to be, tens of thousands of these circumcisions performed, and the rate of injury, the rate of irreversible damage, the rate of sustained injury is significantly higher than that. So for that reason, again, it is not routinely practiced around the globe. The U.S. is really, if it's just in the U.S., it's been continued because it's just kind of a culturally accepted thing, right? So here, right, just taking a little bit closer of a look at some of the vessels throughout the penis. Right here, right, the deep penile artery, or the deep artery, here, traveling through the corpora cavernosa, right here, and right here. The veins, the venous supply, we see, right, several groups of dorsal veins. Dorsal on the back, right, traveling on the back side of the penis. Right. Now again, essentially, think of it this way: if more blood is traveling into the penis than out of the penis, that means more blood remains in the penis, and that's what then causes an erection. That's why if oh man, you have the commercials, right? Oh man, if you had an erection lasting 4 hours or longer, you better start seeing somebody. Yeah, because tissue starts to die when it doesn't receive appropriate fresh blood supply. With an erection, blood has halted. It's being kept within these chambers. So it's kind of the same thing as if it were just not receiving any blood supply. It's a little bit different, but the end result is the same. That's why it can be significantly dangerous, to have an erection for, hours on end. It may sound fun. Well, never mind. It sounds horrible, actually. But anyways, this image, right, you can actually see kind of the chambers. You can see almost like the kind of porousness. Porousness? Yep, that'll be a word today. You can see the porous nature of the corpora cavernosa. Right up and through here. You can see the spongy urethra. You can see the corpus spongiosum. The arteries are kind of difficult to see, right? But you can see the dorsal veins and the dorsal arteries really, really well. Right, the deep artery, that's very hard to see. You see it here, and you can see it here a little bit, but they're much more difficult to see. Right, this here, right, as I mentioned, right, the actual regulation, the movement of the erection, for instance, right, you can see, right, mechanoreceptors, right, actual mechanical stimulation, right, to the receptors, cause that sensation to enter into the spinal cord, and then just reflexively, right, that can cause a presynaptic neuron to travel back to the artery of the penis and dilate them. Now, at the same time, is it the only thing? No, not at all. We see erotic thoughts, sights, smells, sounds, right? I mean, being 13 years of age, right? Being a 13-year-old boy, I mean, just, you know, oftentimes we're just hanging out with grandma. It's like, what the hell, right? What's going on? That has entirely to do with the amount of hormones that's traveling through their bloodstream, right? It has nothing to do with they're talking with their grandmother. They obviously are not, oh, Jesus, I would hope not, right? Certainly not thinking about any sort of erotic thoughts or smells or whatever, right? But yet they can still occur. And again, that has to do with the hormones traveling through their body. That's why teenagers are just like just a gigantic walking hormone. All right, that's where I'd mentioned, right? These receptors, whether it's the mechanoreceptors or the nervous system input from the brain, that leads to enlarging or vasodilation of the arteries, and it leads to vasoconstriction, right, of the veins. So for less blood can get out of the penis and more blood remains inside. So here with the female portion of the anatomy, I'm actually going to pause and I'm going to create another video